And we're good.
All right, great. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate everyone being here tonight, and I really appreciate Kyle assisting with me with getting this all together. And thanks, Tim, for getting this put together as well and accommodating us to our new stream. So tonight, for MySec Lansing, we will be doing a presentation with Tim Lee from DTMB, Michigan Cybersecurity MySoc team. Tim will be doing a presentation on creating Michigan State Police's Computer Crimes Unit, and it's going to be a fun presentation. I look forward to it. Just to kind of go a little bit over things, we are a part of MySec. We're a statewide Michigan cybersecurity IT professional organization and community. If anyone's interested in joining, please ping one of us or join us in our Slack channel. We're very active there. In addition to that, let's talk about our presenter. Tonight we will have Tim Lee. He is a part of the Digital Forensics Examiner team over at MySec, or MySoc, excuse me. He is a retired Michigan State Police detective lieutenant, having served over 25 years. So thank you. Appreciate that, Tim. He created and tonight, which is really going to be a major focus, he actually created the Computer Crimes Unit for MSP, which is really exciting. He was a former instructor for Parabeam and XRY, specializing in mobile devices. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Tim. And I'll mute myself.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. And I just kind of affectionately called this a journey into digital forensics because that's basically what it has been. I'm a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I went in when I was pretty young, actually at age 17, right out of high school. And I did 4 years and came back out and went to Lansing Community College, and I graduated there with a degree in photography. I kind of bumped around on a few different styles of jobs, and then had someone approach me and say, hey, you know, Novi Police Department, and I was living down in that area, is hiring law enforcement dispatchers. And I'm like, huh. And they said, yeah, they're looking for people with military backgrounds. So I went ahead and went through the hiring process and was able to join, and that kind of opened my eyes to law enforcement. And I just had never really considered it, you know, as a career. But it kind of gave me a really good feel for what was possible out there. Because as a dispatcher, you kind of have a little hand in about everything, because you're dispatching law enforcement, you're dispatching you know, for medical, you're dispatching for EMS, you're dispatching for fire. So it was a great introduction for me to that. And from that, I started applying around to different positions, and there hadn't been a state police school at that time in about 4.5 years. And then they decided to run one, and I was lucky enough to be selected into that, into the 108th Recruit School. So was able to successfully make it through as a state police trooper, and I was stationed at several different posts, my first post being Adrian, and then I got stationed up in Pontiac after that, and went to the Groveland team, which is in northern Oakland County, and then went down to Metro North when that post started. And from there, I actually went and assisted at a training academy and met some guys up there that were also at the training academy that happened to be from undercover narcotics. And I was able to interview, and I started in kind of my CID, which was Criminal Investigation Division. And I started in that portion of it. So I went from the uniform side as a trooper to the non-uniform side on the CID side, and got into undercover narcotics. And I went from undercover narcotics into what they called the Technical Services Unit. And this kind of started my journey into the computer realm. And basically, because I had a degree from LCC in photography, they did a lot of hidden microphones, hidden cameras, hidden video cameras. At the time, we had like very huge GPS units, all kinds of things like that, that anything that was covert and technical, that's what the Technical Services Unit was about. So I got into Technical Services Unit. It was an absolute blast. Did all kinds of stuff, surveillance, you know what I mean, anti-crime, everything. It was just a lot of fun. Did that for several years, and then they pulled me up, and I became a sergeant up at headquarters working with special projects. And at that time, that was about rolling out laptops into patrol cars, because at the time they didn't have it, you know, and they just didn't have anything. I started in state police in 1993, And this was about 1997, I believe. And at that time, we didn't have laptops in patrol cars, and they wanted to know about the feasibility of it and what we could do. So I worked on that kind of project, trying to roll those out to the officers in the field and see if that was viable or not. From that point, I got promoted from sergeant to detective sergeant, and I basically one day got tapped on the shoulder by the captain at the time for CID. And he said, "Hey, we're starting to really look into forming a computer crimes unit." And I'm like, "Okay." and he's like, "Yeah, you're kind of that geeky guy. You've been doing TSU and special projects and, laptops and all that stuff. So we'd like you to form one." And I'm like, "All right." And it was just, it was kind of groundbreaking at the time, and didn't really know what was going to go on and where it was going to lead. And I'll get into that in the next slide here. But for now, after like he's mentioned before, since I've retired, I've been able to move on over into the Department of Technology Management and Budget, and I'm the team lead over there for the Michigan Security Operations Forensics and E-Discovery team. So in 1998, I was basically directed to start the computer crimes unit. At the time, when I started doing research into it, there only existed 3 computer crimes units, and I'm just talking about state and local law enforcement. I'm not talking about federal law enforcement, because they were on a different level, and they had one at they had labs at the Secret Service, they had labs at the FBI. But in the state and local law enforcement world, there was only New York Police Department had a rather large computer crimes unit. Chicago PD had one, and then California Computer Crimes Task Force started one, and then 2 before we even developed ours. So I kept doing as much research as possible, and I was able to get to a federal technology forum that was hosted for state and local law enforcement, that was held in Washington, D.C. for about 2 weeks. And with that, I was able to meet law enforcement officers basically from all across the United States. And we all came in, and we were all presenting on different technology projects that our agencies happened to be looking at that time, and trying to, it was basically on, what's the latest technology? What are, officers trying to do? What are we trying to, what's our next steps as far as into the world of technology? But it was great because I got to meet so many law enforcement officers at that 2-week technology forum. I was able to make contacts within the FBI. I was able to make contacts within the FBI, computer crimes in their world. And I was also able to make contacts with in the National Institute of Justice. And it was great that I was able to do that. And I came across several different people from other agencies that were also starting their own computer crimes unit. And they were just like us, saying, "What do we do? How do we do it?" And so one of the first things we started researching, or I started researching, was what were going to be the hardware and software, vendors. What was going to be needed for us to actually start a computer forensic laboratory. And also, additionally, what kind of training were we going to have to get involved with? Because at that time, obviously it's going to be well beyond anything that we've had as troopers, or law enforcement officers for anybody. And we had to know what kind of training was out there, what existed, what could we get? And then also, funding. We had to be funded to start this. And at the time, in 1998, it may not seem like a lot, but we got a direct funding. We were able to put a presentation together, push it up the chain. Our people that handled the budget for the Michigan State Police at that time were able to go to the legislature and ask for a one-time funding fee to start the computer crimes unit. And we were granted somewhere between $1 and $1.2 million to start the computer crimes unit. So it was great that I was able to provide that information up the chain. They were able to get that funding for us, and we could start well on our way. Some of the training at the time that we went to, everything's changed. There's a ton of computer forensic training out there, a ton of internet crime training, all kinds of stuff, covert operation training. Everything's out there right now. But when we started, there wasn't much of anything. So one of the first ones that we got was we were able to go to some of the specialists out there, one of the guys from Chicago who had been doing it for a while, and some of the people from New York, and also some of the people who had been involved in IASIS, which is the International Association for Computer Investigative Specialists, which started back around that time. And they set us up with a school, which they've continued to this day at Eastern Michigan University. And they set it up there, and we basically went down and we trained with them straight for, I believe, about 5 to 6 weeks when we did our initial training there. And that was great. We went through and we built our own forensic computers. We set up covert accounts. We imaged systems. We did everything that we needed to do to get our foot in the door so we could learn on what we were going, what our capabilities would be and what we could do and what kind of, crimes we could even investigate at that time. One of the other ones that we started with too was the National White Collar Crime Center, NW3C. And I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard of NW3C. And at the time, they did all kinds of good classes as far as we did basic data recovery, we did advanced data recovery. There was straight up white collar crime classes. There was online fraud because it was just starting back then. And so we were able to start getting our troopers and civilians involved in the training from NW3C. IASIS, as I had mentioned, they were involved in our Eastern Michigan training, but additionally, they offer and still do a 2-week course that you can go to once a year. They offer it, and they bring people in, and it isn't necessarily like professional instructors who are teaching constantly. They bring in all the people who have been certified in different specialties and are professionals within all the different law enforcement agencies, basically nationwide. And they bring them in for a 2-week period down in Florida, and they do the International Association of Computer Investigative Specialists, or IASIS, training once a year. And it's in the spring down in Florida, in Orlando. And so we were able to start sending our officers to that too, which was great. In-Case Forensic, if you haven't heard of it before, In-Case is one of the major forensic software companies that's out there. We used it then. We're still using it now. And that was one of our first major digital forensic platforms that we used and that we obtained training in. Parabon Corporation, at the time, they are full-fledged now. They offer all kinds of stuff. But at the time, Parabon was the company that you went to for mobile forensics. And that's where you went to and you got training in not just cell phone forensics, because we didn't have smartphones back then, not in 1999. What didn't exist. Smartphones weren't out there yet, but there was a lot of PDAs, personal digital assistants. Blackberries were huge. I mean, all kinds of stuff that we still had to get involved in. We had to be able to get into. We had to be able to retrieve data from. And Parabon was a great company to work for, and I eventually ended up teaching for them for quite a while. And then Access Data, also on par with In-Case, another digital forensic platform that we used as well, and we obtained training in that too. Again, I just kind of glossed this over there a little bit, but the major forensic software that we're using was In-Case, and through Guidance Software, excuse me, and then also Access Data FTK, Forensic Toolkit, and use that. Like I said, for Parabon, we also did Pda Seizure, which was personal digital assistance. If you guys remember back in those days, Palm Pilots, you know what I mean? Hewlett-Packard Jornadas, all that kind of stuff was big at that time. I mean, I carried one around for quite a while until the smartphones caught up, and cell phone forensics as well. And then Digital Intelligence, still out there, still a good company. And we started going to them to get what we called our FREDS, Forensic Recovery of Evidence device. And basically it's our forensic computer. And I'll go into that in a slide later on some of the capabilities of the FRED systems, but Digital Intelligence built them then, and they still build them now. And then at this time, we used write blockers. So we didn't have full-fledged forensic imagers like we have now, but at the time we had to use write blockers and basically use that to prevent altering the original media, whatever we were imaging off of. So if we were imaging off a phone, if we were imaging off of a At the time, USB drives weren't really quite in existence, yet. But if we were imaging a hard drive, anything that we were taking an image of, we had to make sure that we prevented ourselves from altering that digital media in any way, shape, or form so that we could testify in court saying that we did not alter anything. So again, that was write blockers at the time. We still use write blockers now, but just not as much because we have the forensic imagers now, and they're kind of an all-in-one unit, and they're a lot easier to use. Internet crimes against children. Before the Michigan State Police started the computer crimes unit, and before we got involved in it, the ICAC unit for the state of Michigan was actually run by the Attorney General's office. And that was the initial member for the state of Michigan. They got the initial ICAC grant, which is funding for training officers, for getting all the tips and everything for any types of ICAC task force, and also worked in conjunction with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or we call them NCMEC. And NCMEC basically is a federal agency that is out there, specializes in crimes against children. But additionally to that, which is really important in the computer forensic realm, is they keep and maintain a database of child pornography. And yes, it sounds terrible. Nobody wants to keep that. And believe me, they don't want to keep it either. But what they do is they keep that database so that you can hash images that you find in any kind of child pornography case. And then you could go to NCMEC and say, here's images that I've been able to hash off of this case that I'm working on right now. Can you check and see if they are any one of the ones that are actual cases that have been adjudicated, that where the images started from, that who the actual victim was. And that gave a lot of power to law enforcement, and still does to this day, so that you can say, yes, I see, seize this system from this gentleman, he was chatting online trying to entice a 13-year-old girl. We get the tip from his parents, we took over the chat, we're able to get enough for a search warrant. We ended up executing it, seizing, that system, went through it. We found all kinds of what we would consider child pornography. However, it additionally helped if we could prove that there was an actual victim at the end of that child pornography. And they maintain that database where they've traced the photographs back as far as they can to know where they originated from. So it helps out a lot, and they are a great resource to law enforcement. We've kind of went into some of the other stuff, but we can't forget staffing. That was important. At the time, we didn't have anybody. I was the first person that they threw into the unit, and we didn't have anybody else at that time. So I had to work with human resources, never having done this kind of thing before, and I had to work with our command office, our officer structure, to kind of figure out what we were going to do. And initially they wanted only troopers in it, and I was able to, surprisingly enough, convince them and say, no, we don't want to do just that. We want to have troopers that we can train up to detective sergeants, and we also want to have civilians, because they're not law enforcement officers, but they don't have to be, but they're still going to have a lot more knowledge of hardware and software than the typical run-of-the-mill officer is going to have, just because it's two different fields. So yes, the officers have the investigative experience, and that's what they bring to the table, but we needed civilians that knew hardware, they knew software, they knew networking, they knew cybersecurity. We needed things like that. So I was able to convince them. We formulated the first position descriptions for both positions and went through just a mass hiring. It was insane. For anybody who's ever been involved in hiring before, typically you're going to do, all your interviews over the course of like 1 to 2 days or something like that. When we did our initial staffing for the computer crimes unit, I was in an interview room with a couple other sergeants and an inspector for, I believe, 3 weeks straight, interviewing for both civilians and enlisted for every single day for 3 straight weeks until we got everybody that we needed. It was insane. After that, and once we had formed it, one of the missions of ICAC, since we started taking over the ICAC task force, was that we train county and local law enforcement officers. So we had started the unit, got everybody there, started equipping everything, started getting everybody trained. And was within probably about the first year to year and a half, we started going out and doing presentations to our different county sheriff's departments, local police departments, city police departments, whoever we could basically, offer and say, hey, through the Internet Crimes Against Children grant, we have money and they will pay for an officer to come and work with us on the task force. I believe you had to make a 1 to 2 year commitment, but we'll pay for all your training, we'll pay for all your equipment, we'll buy you systems, we'll buy you software, all that kind of stuff. And so we were able to start going through and training a lot of officers. So it was definitely awesome that we were able to do that. And it still continues to this day that county and local law enforcement officers are a huge part of the ICAC task force. The Attorney General's office assigned us assistant attorney generals that worked directly with the ICAC task force. And that was also, again, another phenomenal resource that they started that at the very beginning, so that when we started to prosecute cases and when we started to take down, child predators, we could basically go directly to the AG's office with their specialists that knew exactly how to run those cases. And that was great. It was just phenomenal. Continuing the journey, obviously there was a lot of bumps and things like that in between now and then. But in about 2015, I decided to go ahead and purchase some military time that I had from back in the Marines. And I purchased my military time and retired from state police. And I was employed by Department of Technology Management and Budget over in their Michigan Security Operations Center. And that's where I remain today. And basically, what do I do now with Security Operations Center? Basically, we do a lot of internal investigations. So we are doing employee investigations, and it's not just for DTMB. Basically, for my team, we basically assist on internal investigations for every single state agency that's out there. So it doesn't matter whether it's DTMB, it doesn't matter whether it's the DNR, the state police, Department of Corrections, DHHS, all of them, we assist every one of them. Additionally, we assist law enforcement investigations, which obviously is comfortable for me, but we have a lot of federal, state, and local investigations that are either investigating, state employees, or they're investigating, any kind of intrusion or anything else like that that might cross over the state networks, and we assist them with that. We do e-discovery cases, which are kind of litigation holds, and e-discovery cases are a lot of that. One, I'm not going to talk about every single case, but one that everybody knows about is Flint Water. That started in about, I believe, 2016 or 2017, and still continues to this day. Where basically on e-discovery, that means that anybody who is suing the state or anybody who is trying to find out information from the state, like a FOIA request, Freedom of Information, they put in their requests and say, this is what we're looking for, and this is specifically who we're looking for, whether it's an agency director or a person who's in charge of a particular section. And they come to us, and we basically do all the imaging of all the phones, laptops, tablets, anything else like that that relate to that case. And we work on that. And the same thing holds with litigation holds. So we may have an agency director that was part of a lawsuit that started for the DNR. And that agency director leaves the DNR and goes take an employment somewhere else. Well, even still, they have to hold on to that person's data for however long that case is going. So we get involved in that too. And that directly relates, again, like I said, to a lot of lawsuits against the state. Also assist with malware, spyware, and intrusion analysis. I'm sure you guys are aware, as part of DTMB, they basically run, and with our Security Operations Center, run and protect the state networks that affect all of the different state agencies. And for us in forensics and e-discovery, we basically are brought in at the end of the investigation. So in other words, we are brought in When the intrusion happens, that's a different section within security operations. That's incident response is the one that detects the intrusion, blocks it, stops it from going any further. They work with threat analytics to decide what kind of, what was it? Was it malware? Was it spyware? Was it an actual intrusion? Was it, social engineering? How did it happen? And when they can get down to that ground server, ground zero workstation or server or tablet or laptop or, cell phone or smartphone, whatever, then they'll bring that to us and they'll say, hey, now we want to work with you guys. We want to get this imaged and we want to take a look and see, what was the attack? How did it infect the state system? How did it compromise this particular system? Where did it spread out from there? And we work with them on that. Some of the tools that we use out there, forensic imagers, what I was talking about, that's a Tableau right there, or Tableau. I've never been particularly sure on how exactly to pronounce that. But basically, that's an all-in-one imaging unit. They are phenomenal units. We can image USB drives, external hard drives. We can image SATA hard drive, SSDs, all kinds of stuff with that, where we basically can plug into one side the drive that we're trying to capture and plug in on the other side over to an external hard drive or another SSD or another hard drive, whatever we want to image it over to. And then we'll use the device in the middle there, the forensic recovery of evidence device, the big Fred tower there. And we'll use that to basically, that's where all our forensic software sits on that device. And we'll take the drive that's been imaged or whatever that we're trying to look at, and we'll basically hot swap them, because those are all hot swappable drives that are down there at the bottom of the Freds. And so I can hot swap out and work on all kinds of different cases at the same time without ever shutting the Fred down, and just open up different cases in the different forensic software that I'm using for that day. Over there, another program that's invaluable to us is Celebrate, and that's our main mobile device platform. So it's smart devices, it's SIM cards, we can do USBs in there as well. We can also do digital cameras in there. And we don't really get involved in this, but the state police does, and we can do drones if we needed to, because there's a lot of information you can get off a drone. So again, the forensic recovery of evidence device, that's one of the main computers that we use there. We've got a Tableau imager in there as well. So if one of the forensic imagers is busy, I can also pull out the tray there and plug it into the Ultra Bay, and I can just image it right there to the computer if I want to. We've got 2 SATA drives, bays in there. We've got 4 hot swap bays, multimedia card readers, DVD writable drive. Not that we really use those too much anymore, but you never know what you're going to come across or what's going to be in someone's office when you're taking a look. So it's good to have about everything that you can. Hold on. Not sure why that stopped on me, so we'll try it again here. Okay, Celebrate. So this is where we get that forensically sound acquisition, multiple types of devices. Like I said before, we'll get mobile devices, SIM cards, drones, USB storage devices. And basically, this is where we complete that forensically sound investigation of the acquired data. Celebrate, I can't say enough about. It's a phenomenal product. I love using it. It's a lot of fun. It is for cell phones what Incase or FTK is for the PC world. So when we're talking about mobile devices, the UFED system is just great, and you can produce all kinds of different findings in all kinds of different formats. I mean, it's got 20 different formats we can produce reports into. The Attorney General's office loves it as well, because we basically give them a raw UFED report at the end, and they can take a UFED reader that we export for them, which is a dumbed down version of the Celebrate system itself, and they can basically strip away things that they don't need. So if it's a FOIA request and all that's being requested is calendar entries, that's all the person's going to get. They're not going to get the full capture like we get. So if all they're asking for is email messages, that's all they're going to get is email. So if all they're asking for is text, that's all they're going to get is text. So the AG's office loves it. Incase forensics just shows you a couple of the screens that we use there, going from opening a new case to basically what it looks like when we start out, and the different capabilities there. So again, we're acquiring data from workstations, laptops, external hard drive, USB drives, server drives, whatever you're using. Again, forensically sound for in-case, and we can also produce findings in multiple different formats. Probably one of my favorites is I like producing the formats into what they call a triage report, which comes out in HTML. And so that's kind of nice because there are still people out there that if you do produce something into a Word document, they may not have Microsoft Word. I know, as strange as that sounds, usually for state work, all the state workers have it, but you just never know. So, but everybody's always got web browsers. And so if you produce it in HTML, they can basically pull that up, and it's a self-driven report where they can click on every single section and whatever I've found and discovered in it. In-case is also powerful. Do things just like we can do in Celebrate, where you can go in and do keyword searches. You can go in and do searches based on different algorithms that you can basically plug in and do what we call Grep searches. So if I'm looking for, when we had a case where we thought that someone may have breached the Treasury system, we wanted to make sure on the system that was accessed that there weren't any outgoing social security numbers. So we basically did a grep expression and plugged in to where it would only identify social security numbers and only identify files that were outgoing, and ran that. And it takes several days to run something like that, but still at the end you could go through and look and say, did something happen or did something not happen? It also has gallery search. You can go in and look at all the pictures and images and videos that you want to look at any given time. And one of the most powerful things that we use it for is basically a line-by-line time date search. And so basically we can search on all the lines of code that have gone on in a particular day. And if we know that that's when the intrusion happened, or that's when the critical issue happened for the state on this particular system, then we can go in and we look at that specific date and time and just start going through it line by line and see what happened. So it's a good system. And so some of the stuff on, what have we done? At security operations. So County Sheriff's Department, this is just kind of one particular case that comes to mind. County Sheriff's Department came to us. We received a search warrant from the Sheriff's Department. They were investigating a state employee. I'm not going to say what for, but basically we were the main point of contact, and we always are, so that they come to us. And basically we worked with different teams within the Department of Technology Management and Budget field. So we would go to OA messaging and get with them to make sure that they could do a export of all the emails that this particular employee be investigated. So we worked with them. Delivery Services, the ones that handles all our H drives and S drives. So we would go to them and get a capture of the H drive and produce that over for the search warrant for the Sheriff's Department. And Telecom grabs all the phone records and everything for desk phones and all that. We made forensic images of everything that they requested and basically turned it all over to the Sheriff's Department for their investigation. I mean, that's just kind of a not a one-off. I mean, but we do that kind of thing all the time. But that's, a typical case that we would do for local law enforcement assist. Another one that happened was a federal investigation that I got involved in. So a particular federal agency, I'm not going to say which one again, came to us, and they needed assistance because they were doing a investigation. It crossed over with federal employees and with state employees working on similar issues there, I guess, or similar agencies. And I had to work with them to basically gain access to one of our state buildings after hours, and I coordinated with the federal agency. So one of their agents and one of their attorneys were present with me when I did this, and we went in covertly after hours and obtained, sorry about that, and basically obtained forensic images. Okay. There we go. Okay, we obtained forensic images of multiple computers in the middle of the night just to maintain the secrecy because they didn't want anyone to know what they were doing until the federal investigation was completed. So that was another type of assistance that we've done on different occasions. And then this one was a little bit more unique, but during the previous administration, this administration hasn't had much of a chance with all the stuff that's been going on with COVID, obviously, and all the travel restrictions. But during the previous governor's administration, they did a lot of travel overseas. And after they did one of their major trips over, I believe, to China that they were doing then, they had brought back and it wasn't the governor. I mean, it was just somebody from the governor's staff brought back a cell phone and a tablet that were just massively infected with, viruses and malware, spyware, all kinds of stuff. It was just horrible. And the minute it hit the system, we always call them malware Mondays. The minute it hit the system on a Monday when they came back from their trip, it just started infecting everything. So we started working with our smart device team to get the governor's office staff, on basically meeting us in the middle there, and started issuing them temporary phones and temporary tablets. So the smart device team now will basically take their original phone and their original tablets, give them just a blank slate one with barely anything on it, let them use that while they go overseas and travel overseas. And then the minute they bring it back to us, we go ahead and analyze it for spyware and malware, and the smart device team gives them their original device back. So they don't use any of their original devices, which might have original data and all that kind of stuff overseas. So it's a way better way to go than malware infection Mondays, as we call it. Well, that's kind of in a nutshell there. Different things that I've been involved in. I've still been involved in more than that, but I tried to make it not too long and not too short for you guys. So,
no, I think that's really great. I'm gonna check the YouTube channel just to see if we got any questions going on over there. For right now, it looks like. Let me know. I can send them. Okay, so Kyle's already wrote there that if we have any questions, we can write. He'll send them over to us actually, which will make it a lot easier. I actually have a couple communications. Did you want to ask any questions, Kyle, yourself?
No, you can go ahead. You can start.
Dig right in. Well, first, thanks, Tim, for really doing this presentation. I really appreciate you taking your personal time to really do this presentation to kind of help educate the communities on these things. I really appreciate it. It was
no problem.
It was really cool, and I just really want, I don't need it, but I just really want the Fred unit at my house. I can't really think of how I know that, but it just looks sweet.
They're a lot of fun.
Yeah. I was actually, that's one of my questions I was going to ask. Okay, so what currently, so from the crimes unit to where you're at in MySoc, you've had quite a span of a career here, being able to do a lot of fun stuff with a lot of cool technology and a lot of cool tools. From that being said, what's your favorite toy? Well, it's a tool. It's a tool, but if you get to work with cool tools, they're toys. So what's your favorite toy that you've been able to kind of use throughout your career?
I mean, probably one of the ones that, I like the most is I have more of it's a really lightweight Panasonic laptop, but it's one of their their tough books. Mm-hmm. And we actually got that through working with Celebrite. So it's a Celebrite unit. So it's got all their bells and whistles and toys on it and everything. And we made sure that it was upgraded so it's got everything on it. But it's just really lightweight. And I additionally have loaded all the forensic stuff on it too. So if I'm going out in the middle of the night to do a capture or whatever like that, the Panasonic Tough Book's what I take with me because it's got everything on it. And I just need a couple of imagers. I just need a couple of drives and I can set that thing up and just go to town. So, I mean, I just love that thing because it's just so lightweight. It's just so easy to take, and yet it's powerful at the same time.
Well, see, you actually answered one of my other questions, but I'm kind of still curious. Okay, so when you mentioned you had a federal investigation, we had to do overnight covert stuff. So I'm thinking Ninja. Tim's digging his way in and going, boom, comes around the corner, get her, jump. So what's it like doing an overnight kind of covert kind of work?
Well, I mean, on this side of it, now that I'm working for the state, it's good in the fact that I work on the cybersecurity side for critical infrastructure protection, but also we have our OIP side, which is the Office of Infrastructure Protection. So for them, they're great to partner with because I can say, this is the building I need to get into. And I need to get into it from this time till this time. Can you check and make sure that no one's going to be there? And then they say, yep, no one's going to be there. And then those are the guys that can say, okay, well, you've got your access card. And I'm like, yep. They say, we are going to give you basically rights to that parking lot, to that building, to those offices, to this, to that, to this. So basically you're just going in and badging through on everything. And then they say the next morning, we're going to take your entries and we're going to remove them from the system so nobody knows that you were there.
So it's kind of like you're like almost like a ninja blue team, red team kind of thing. Like nobody knows, but you're supposed to be there.
The hardest part on any of those type of things, and you know as well as I do because we've all seen it, is you get to that desktop where you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to image this system? They have 2 inches of dust everywhere, you know, and it's horrible because then you're like, now I can't really do a whole heck of a lot, you know, so it becomes a lot trickier. If someone's, you know, clean and neat, you know what I mean? And it's, you know, yeah, it's easier to go ahead and just remove it, put it back, you know what I mean? And none the wiser. But man, if it's thick with dust, that's a problem. So,
we do have another question from online, so I can route that over here. It'll pop up on the bottom here, but 2-part question. What is a best practice for recovering a hard drive for analysis? And how do you ensure nothing is lost when removing power?
That is a good question. Basically, you can do it both ways. So if you're worried that there's going to be data on there, basically what we've been doing a lot more of right now, memory forensics. So if you're worried that you're going to lose something, you go through and you do the memory forensics first. So we have different, you know, agents that are on all the state employees that get pushed out for everything. So whether it's a Symantec agent just for, you know what I mean, just for protection, you know, or it's one of any other 100 agents that we've got out there, they pushed them all out. And so we've got one on the system there that we can basically go in and say, okay, well, we want to do memory forensics on this system, and we want to go in and grab this file, this file, this file, this file, this file, and we run that program overnight or through the day and go ahead and grab everything. And once it's grabbed everything, then we can go in and do a seizure and do dead forensics at that point. So we do the memory forensics first if we think we're going to lose anything, and then we go in and we do the dead forensics afterwards and do the analysis on the hard drive.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for the question, by the way. That was cool. Yeah. So I actually have a question too. So like, okay. So with creating the computer forensics unit, right, for MSP, when you were out there creating that, what was your biggest hurdle? I mean, besides the fact that you had a 3-week interviewing time, like that sounds mind-numbing.
Oh, it was.
Congratulations.
Yeah. It was terrible. I mean, again, the biggest thing at the time, and it's, you know, it's hard to imagine because computer crimes units have been out there so long now and they've evolved so much, you know, but at the time, that was just the hardest thing, is that there wasn't anything, you know, and so you couldn't just go out there and say, well, you know, I want to set up a forensic lab to do, you know what I mean, blood analysis. Well, yeah, you can go to the, you know, the feds and you can get all the paper, you know, that you want on that, and you can go to NIJ and get all the nomenclature for just setting up a lab and do it. But at the time, there wasn't anything. So, I mean, I had to go around and get as much information as I can for everybody that I could, and then additionally go back and present all my findings all the way up the chain and keep justifying every single thing that I wanted to do.
So the one thing I have to think of next is just like leading into that is how mature were search engines at that point? Because I have a great Google and DuckFoo ability, but that's because I've been doing it for so long and breaking so much stuff. So I'm thinking, like, for your situation, like how, like, what did you have to do to find stuff? Like, how did you get, like, I know I need to connect this to this.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, at that time, because there were very few units to go to and very few resources to go to for that, that was where we really leaned on the vendors at the time. So we really leaned on digital intelligence to say, you know, what do we need to do to build a forensic computer, and what kind of forensic computers do we need, and how robust do we need that system to be? And the same thing, we reached out to Encase, we reached out to FDK, you know, we reached out to Parabon. What are we going to need? If we run your software, how much of a, you know, beefy system do we need in order to run your software? How much memory do we have to have? You know what I mean? So, which back then is a joke compared to what we have now. You know what I mean? So
it's like the Bill Gates saying, you only need so much. You know?
Yeah.
I can't see why we'd need more than this many megabytes for a system.
I remember people saying that. Oh my gosh. Yeah. You'll never need more than this. I'm like, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being in the server team for the state of Michigan. I remember walking in the server room and they had like this list of bytes and how they break out, and it gets all down to like yotta bytes, and then it shows like this beach, and it's like this beach doesn't cover how many bytes would be in a yotta byte, and like all the grains of sand. And I was like, wow, okay, thanks. That's a physical explanation. I get it now.
Yeah, we used to, I mean, it's funny to think about way back when, but we used to back up all our data at the time to CD drives and then changed over to DVD drives after that. And now, everything is on, servers, basically that we keep off network. So I have a Fred NAS too that just connects just to it's a network attached storage that just connects to the Fred units only and is not on the internet whatsoever, so that I can basically, acquire a device, dump it out onto the Fred NAS, and I can work off of it from the Fred NAS. And we always maintain a copy, because I can't tell you how many times it happens. You hand over that external hard drive to an agency. Here you go. Here it is. Take special care of that. And 2 weeks later, they're like, I damaged this and I don't have an image anymore. I'm like, oh, man. So, yep. So, yeah, you always got to have a backup. So.
Now with you, Kyle, don't you do something similar with Blue Team over at where you're employed, right? You do something. Do you something similar, like forensics?
Yeah. So we on our cybersecurity incident response team with Consumers Energy, we've got similar kind of. We actually started off with a Fred box, but it needed to be updated, so we actually purchased our own hardware, which for us it worked in our case for the type of collections that we were doing. So we've got like a 32 terabyte RAID array on it for all of our image storage and the analysis that we do. We got PCI Express, like crazy fast, like just everything. It's fantastic.
Yep.
Well, and we use F response for our remote collections. So a client server model where you'll deploy out to a host machine on the network that you want to take an image of, whether it's going to be memory or logical or physical image, and you can do it right over the network. Really cool part of that tool, by the way, is that you can analyze remote memory without having to take a copy of it. So if you want to just take a quick look, and let's say it's a server with 128 gigs of memory, trying to take that image is going to be kind of rough. But with F response, you can connect to it directly, and then on your analyst machine, you could actually start looking at that memory and playing around with it.
Right, and for us, we're using not F response, but FireEye, and so the FireEye agent is what's deployed on each one of them. So, and again, just because we're talking for the state, conservative estimate is somewhere over 50,000 employees right now, and they're all over the state. It just depends on where they are. So yeah, if you're trying to do a capture of somebody in the Lansing area, or even someone in the Detroit area or Grand Rapids, you're gold. But if you're trying to go to the remote DNR station up in the thumb, it's not happening. You know what I mean? It just, and people still on top that are just technology people just don't get it. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's not that it can't do it. It's just the size of the pipe. There's nothing there. You know what I mean? It's probably a phone line and some string. I mean, it's just not there, but...
Yeah, we got the same kind of limitations. There's some sites that they have like a T1 line or something terrible, and like if you try and take any type of memory capture or pull large files, you'll take the site down on accident.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Well, and then the other fun part is, with everybody working from home, you have auto on VPN or technologies like that may involve. So the work machines always connect back to the network, but it's over their home internet. So their home internet may have some limitations. For example, your download speeds may be fantastic, like 200 megabytes per second or something, but your upload speeds may be capped at like 5 to 9 megs a second.
Wow, yeah.
So if you're trying to pull stuff from someone's home machine for evidence or other pieces, like you can run into problems where you're waiting like half the day for a small file or something else. So it's definitely doing network over the network style forensics has lots of pain points for sure.
That's for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely evolved a lot, and that's, great. But yeah, I mean, we're hampered by the same thing you're hampered by. So when you're sitting in your office and you're like, man, this is gold. I'm over in the secondary complex. Everything's so fast, so lightning speed, and everything. And then you're like, well, now I got to grab this machine. Where's that sitting at? Oh my gosh. You know what I mean? How am I going to get that? So
in the mountains.
yeah. And I've convinced them several times that's the only way that I could do it. It's like, there's just the way I'm wasting my time. Just send me out there in the middle of the night and I'll grab the machine, I'll image it, and I'll come back. You know what I mean? It's not perfect, but it's way better than trying to do it, and if anybody's even remotely savvy and you're trying to be covert, they can see, so they're like, why is my laptop so slow? What the heck's going on? Where's all these resources? What's happening? So.
Yeah, then sometimes depending on the type of collection that you're performing, if it's not sensitive in regards to like destroying like deleted files on disk or something like that, running live tools on the system and dumping out the output of those tools to a directory that you can pull back is sometimes a workaround that you might be able to use in certain cases.
Yeah.
Yep. But I always hate doing it. I hate anytime I have to write to disk if like what was it? Carbon Black Response as an EDR platform is fantastic for doing your initial triage and kind of context of to what execution happened on a system. Like what process was talking to what, what IP address was talking between things, and all this great information. And part of that is it has a live response feature where you can basically have a command prompt remotely on the endpoint that you're working on. The tricky part is that I was to say that there's a lot of options in this command line. One of them is that you can pull memory, which is awesome because you could use that to pull down an 8 gig memory file and copy back over to you. The bad part is it copies at 8 megs or 8 gigs directly to disk first, and then it copies it over to you. So if you had a case where like maybe you wanted to try and recover a deleted file or something like that, you pretty much just destroyed any chance of that.
Wow. Yeah. Crazy.
So there's always know your tools when you use them, especially if you're doing any remote stuff, to make sure that your impact and your footprint that you might have on the endpoints when you mess around.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not related to security, but I remember that on the server team. There was 2 things you really wanted to remember. Sudo if you really have to, and -f if you really have to. If you do them wrong, it's kind of like it's like I've done it. I was backing up 2 different systems on a cluster, and I was just like, this isn't working, and I'm working 14 hours, and I'm tired. Sudo -f, and I'm like, well, that crashed everything.
Yeah.
Whoops. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not as savvy in the security areas as you guys are. I'm actually working towards that. So that's kind of a nice thing to actually have this conversation, actually listen to you guys do like, shop talk, so I can actually understand more of what's going on too.
Yeah, but remember like your basic IT skills, not even basic, even like just IT skills in general, whether it's in networking, whether you're scripting or deploying out software in an environment, all those pieces, all the learnings that you have from that and your critical thinking skills you get from it easily translate into a career into security. So, before I got into forensics, my career was doing IT stuff. So I did OS and application and OS deployment and like 3rd level troubleshooting for when things broke. So like looking at debugging, looking at logs all the time and timestamps to try and figure out why something broke. Was it hardware? Was it software? Was it something else? It made it easy to go into forensics because it's just more of the same, just more exciting artifacts and things, more places to look to get answers to your questions.
So with that perspective, Kyle, since you're kind of very similar to what Tim's at, right? So you can kind of see where Tim started and where you're at. Like, how much more thankful are you where you're at now compared to like where Tim started?
Well, he also started like when there's such a lack of resources, right? Like today, like you can go on the internet and you can find so many tutorials and blog posts and write-ups, and the community is growing all the time. The Discord server for digital forensics is massive and has tons of people if you got stuck or had a question. The vendors that exist now that are responsive that you can get a hold of, very different. So
yeah, it definitely is. I mean, it's so different than when it first started off. And yeah, it's just great that it has evolved so much, because you can always do that. If you get stuck on anything at any given point, there's always someone you go, there's somebody out there that's hit this same issue. I know there has to be. I can't be the first one to do it, So there's always somebody out there that's like, oh yeah, I banged my head on the wall about that. What are you looking for? And I'm like, I'm looking for this. And so,
Yeah, that's why I said earlier, like my Google foo, duck foo is like in really good practice. Cause like I run all my systems on Linux, and that's pretty much what I'm constantly doing is just kind of breaking stuff. And then, like people have been like, how do you know what you're doing? I'm like, I don't. I Google a lot and I apply what I find and, pray, a lot of VMs. And,
well, if you like playing around in Linux, you should go and download some of the forensic software that they have out there for that.
It's actually a really good point. I'll make a note of that. Yeah, because actually I didn't think of that.
Yeah, SANS has SIFT out there for Linux, and SIFT is free. I believe it's still free as long as you have a SANS account. Yeah, and so you can download that, and if you're good at Linux, you'll love SIFT. It's a lot of fun to play around with.
I'm going to check that out because I actually have a friend who is actually she's really cool. She's on Twitter, and she is actually a SANS instructor as well. So I'm just because I think she does this stuff. So I'm like, like it's stuck. Like, is there anything I should be aware of before I jump in?
Well, and it's kind of nice because I like, Linux still can do things that other systems can't. You know what I mean? And I'm not by no means a Linux guru like you are, but I still mess around with it. But what I do like to do is, because I don't have the option now working for the state. I can't go out and just, order pieces and parts and buy them just because the way we're hampered with, our financial rules and everything. So that's why we have to go to digital intelligence and get stuff built for us, because they'll do one vendor, one product, and they'll buy it. But I can still take the old Freds that are not serviceable anymore for the new stuff that I'm doing, and I can rebuild them using Linux. Well, Linux uses a heck of a lot less resources, and I can keep using those boxes. So It's kind of fun, and then you can just play around with it. You know what I mean? You can do all kinds of different stuff, and like, I can't find this in case. I'm going to take this thing and plug it in on a DD image and see what I can find.
What distro are you putting on the Freds? What allows you to like repurpose them?
Well, I mean, I'll image out over to like a SATA hard drive or an external and everything, and if I want to move it, then I just pull it out of the hot swap bay, and then I can push it over onto another system, and then run it off of that. Oh. So I can just move the hard drive all around, but that's after I already copy it over to the Fred NAS. So you keep the copy on the Fred NAS always, but I can take an image copy anywhere I want to use it.
Oh, okay, got it. Cool, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just nerding out, just because we're territorial, like like all distros really you can make whatever you want. I'm just like it's OpenSUSE, right? Like OpenSUSE is the best. No, I was gonna make sure, like, because I know we probably shouldn't go over an hour because I want to make sure you get your free time back because I mean you've worked hard enough today as it is. But I did want to mention one area of the slides that you brought up was like the NICMIC stuff, and I don't know how involved you were in those things, but thank you if you were, because I know that requires a lot of patience and has high burnout. Because anything to do with kids, in my opinion, like I'd be horrible in that area because I have no patience for those people. I'd be like, how do we bomb like their computer and just like destroy them?
It was tough, and it's still kind of a spot where not every agency recognizes that quite as much as they should. The FBI does. They basically look at the crimes against children arena the same as they look at their kind of serial killer units. They put people in it for several years and then they pull them off, not because they can't do the job, but because they have to leave. They can't look at that stuff forever. And the crimes against children is the same thing. You can't look at child pornography forever. So we used to have to cycle guys through and say, okay, you've done enough of that. You need to come off of that. Now you're going to work on some of the financial stuff. You're going to work on, cybercrime stuff, whatever, but you're not going to look at child pornography cases for at least, a couple months. You need to get away from it, and you have to. They're difficult cases to work.
Well, honestly, thanks for having that empathy of understanding, because to not be aware of how mentally affecting that must be for because I mean, I like I said, I'd be horrible at it because I just wouldn't have the patience. I think in one day, I'd just be so frustrated. I think I'd break down. I think honestly, I always think of those individuals that actually do those jobs or volunteer. I know, the name is failing me. but he's on the social engineering team. He's the one that does the social engineering village over at DEF CON, and they do things as a nonprofit where they help find those predators and help get them to law enforcement so actually can take them down. And I was thinking that, I'm like, good job, guys. You guys have amazing empathy. And like he said, like we've had to cycle people out in that volunteer positions because you can't keep them too long in that. Because
no, you just can't. Yeah.
It's just damaging.
But, well, thanks for having me, guys.
Well, thank you, Tim.
All right.
Is there anything else you'd like to, or Kyle, would you like to share anything? Or
No, I think we covered a lot. It's great to meet you, Tim.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you,
Great to meet everybody.
Thanks everybody for attending, and have a great night, guys.
All right.